Good morning. Welcome to the breakfast meeting here on NBS television. My name is Isabella Tugume. It is the 10th day of June, the year 2020. We have had a couple of instances that aren't exactly what we're looking forward to. Yesterday, we registered a couple of deaths, one for a major general here in Uganda and then also the president of Burundi. But let's continue to live life, take each day as it comes, continue to pray, protect each other, and we'll continue to live and pray to make it all the way until the end of 2020. Now, the conversation we're having this morning is managing multiple disasters in Uganda during the COVID-19 pandemic, the lessons and experiences for the future. Now, if I may, Uganda is endowed with the world's richest ecosystems and biodiversity resources, including water resources, plant and animal species, fertile, diverse landscapes, energy and mineral resources, as well as rich and diverse cultural heritage. Now, however, environmental degradation and loss of biodiversity, especially deforestation and wetland encroachment, have continued. In the recent times, we've seen a couple of disasters that continue to affect people, multiple floods, the issue of water levels rising, and this has led to some lakes bursting their banks, in this case displacing a couple of people in that area. We've also seen hailstorms, floods, locusts as well continue to be a problem. And even before we came into the pandemic, we were dealing with the issue of locusts, and as of today, that continues to be a problem. So in light of whatever it is that's happening, the United Nations Development Programme, in partnership with the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Water and Environment, have come here to raise awareness and draw attention to managing multiple disasters in Uganda during COVID-19, finding the lessons and experiences for the future. Now, joining me for a broader conversation is the UNDP resident representative, Elsie Atefa, and we will be joined by Minister of State for Disaster Preparedness and Refugees, Musa Echweru, who will be joining us live on our TV sets. But so he is actually here. Good morning, Honorable. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm happy to be in NBS and discussing a subject of critical concern in our time.
We're actually as well very delighted to have you. And given that you're here, I'll start with you first before I delve in with Elsie. We want to understand, Uganda is experiencing disasters. Look, we're having locusts. We've seen raising water levels, Lake Victoria, massive floods in the areas of Kasese, among other districts. What impacts are such disasters having on the livelihoods of the people in those particular areas and as well on the economy?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that let me start by giving my condolences to the people of Burundi for the loss of their president. President Nkurunziza, a personal friend to me. I know some people may not be comfortable with that, but I want to say very clearly that we had a personal relation. He has invited me to his country a number of times to discuss the subject of very many refugees who are in Uganda, with the view that we could see how best we could work with the UNHCR to facilitate a tripartite arrangement for a repatriation, voluntary repatriation of Burundi refugees. So I have had interactions with him at a personal level, and therefore his demise is a loss to me and a loss to we as a country, because a neighbor of that a giant of that level has fallen. The second one is condolences to my brother again, the family of my brother Kasiri Gwanga. A man, again, some people may have whatever they want to say about him, but at a personal level, again, I want to tell the country that apart from being a major general, he was a personal friend. For some reason, we seem to be getting along very well, me and Kasiri Gwanga. He had a lot of respect for me as a person, and I indeed also had some respect for him. I may not have agreed with one or two things that he used to do, but just like any human being, but in principle, we used to get along very well. Now, the third one is my condolences to the victims of disasters that have afflicted the country. The country has been visited by a lot of disasters in the recent past and continues to do that. Right now, I'm preparing in the next few days to be going to Kasese, where I will be taking a condolence message from government in form of Mabugo to the 9 families that perished recently when 8 people died when River Lubiria burst its banks and swept people's homes and killed our people, including a UPDF soldier and one young man who died in River Nyamwamba when he was just about 10 years and a very lively young boy going to primary school. So the government is arranging some small token of sympathy that I should be delivering to the people of Kasese in the next few days. But coming to what you're saying is the truth is that the planet Earth, our mother, planet Earth, is suffering stress. I think our collective actions as members of the human family have very badly degraded the planet. We have degraded the planet to the level that the patience that it has exhibited over the years seems to be running out. And the way it is demonstrating that lack of patience now is by fighting back. And in the fighting back is what experts, you people are calling climate change. Climate change, in my opinion, is an expression of the planet to the fatigue and the bruising that we, members of the human family, have created an occasion to it. Just to summarize, I want to say we have degraded the environment to the levels that we must wake up now and revisit our reckless actions. We have destroyed the forests around the world. Around the world, this is not just unique to Uganda. We have destroyed the natural forests that once provided a very beautiful cover to this mother of ours, planet Earth. We have silted the rivers, very, very good rivers that have continued to feed the country and balance the ecosystem. We have silted them. We have damaged the wetlands. For example, coming back to Uganda here, damaged the wetlands and reclaimed them and turned some of them to our homes and farms. And that also has had ramifications. We have done so many things that the patience of the planet, that is our Mother Earth, has run out. And the planet is fighting back. And in fighting back, we are witnessing all these kind of things that we are seeing now. We are witnessing floods. We are witnessing landslides. We are witnessing even emergence of some things like this very problem that we are facing today, COVID-19. COVID-19, experts are telling us, should have been a conflict between we humans and some of the animals in some parts of the world, and that has resulted into us picking this very, very devastating virus that is ravaging the planet. So all these are nature's ways of now telling us that enough is enough. I have been patient as a planet and with the hope that you would revisit your ways of doing things, and we don't seem to have had that thinking of knowing that we can only survive on this planet by sustainably managing the planet. In fact, in the words of some of the experts, nature does not need us, but we humans need nature. And it is incumbent on us human beings to really see how best we can revisit our actions and do what experts are now calling climate change adaptation. Climate change adaptation for us in the disaster speak, we call it disaster risk reduction. That is to say, we recognize that we have caused damage to the planet. We also recognize that the planet has run out of its patience. And then we now say we must coexist because we have no other home. This is the only home we have, planet Earth. And in having the only planet Earth as our home, we must now do things that are meant to rebuild the damage, to repair the damage that we have occasioned to the planet. The best ways to do it, for example, is by getting out of the wetlands. For us, our case in Uganda, getting out of the wetlands and allowing these wetlands to rejuvenate. That's the first thing that we must do, and it should not be a subject of debate. As I talk now, I can tell you the rising levels of the lakes have caused a massive displacement to two categories of people. the categories that are affected, and I really have my sympathy for those, are those who were innocently living in areas not very far from the lake, but areas that were supposed to be naturally inhabited by humans. Those people have also been affected, and for those, my heart is with them. But there are also those who had actually gone and decided to put their houses in what was supposed to be a lake, in what was supposed to be wetland. For example, here in Kampala, I know of 5 members of parliament whose homes right now are underwater in the sides of Kirinya. Their homes are underwater. 5 members. I do sympathize with them because they have lost a lot of money. But I have asked them at individual level that the lake has come back to its home. Please get out of this place and get out of this place and go to live in the place where humans are supposed to live, and leave this place to be occupied by the lake and then all those other creatures that are supposed to be living in the lake. So that is what is happening. That is the challenge that is I want the country to know. And then we now have, first of all, those 2 categories, and so we have to see how best we can. Then we must go back and say, if we destroy the forest, because like for example our case in Uganda, the level at which the forests are receding is worrying. We inherited this forest from our parents. They passed a beautiful country to us, but it looks like we are behaving like tourists. We now, the present generation, we think we must go, and as we go, we must go with the beautiful country that our parents bequeathed to us. What is the future of our children? What are we bequeathing to our children? We must abandon the degradation of forests and rebuild the forest. We allow the forest to be to rejuvenate and facilitate its rejuvenation. That must be done. And so my sympathies to all those who are now afflicted by the actions, the reckless actions of human beings. My sympathies to them, especially those who are innocently victims of those kind of ferocious actions of Mother Nature. We hope we will be able to do whatever we can do to, one, make sure that lives are saved, and then while lives are saved, and then we learn lessons from it, and then we don't repeat. We must not continue repeating what we are doing again, like when normalcy returns, then we go back to where we were displaced. We must now build back better. That is, if we have had a situation where we have been invaded by a river that reoccupied what was its natural course, we must not go there. That's why I have even proposed, for example, in Kasese, we are working with the leadership that Kilembe Hospital must be relocated from where it is now to another, because from records we have been made to understand that that hospital is sitting in what used to be River Nyamwamba's route, and River Nyamwamba, yeah.
All right, so Honorable, thank you for your 2 cents on this matter. You've delved into a couple of questions before I ask them, but however, I have another guest with me in studio. And before we look at the solutions government has in place for people that have been affected by the events that have happened, we have as well a UNDP resident representative, LC Atefa, who wants to enlighten us as well. Why is this particular discussion on nature and disaster risk reduction important for them as UNDP, and why is it critical during this time and post-COVID-19, Elsie?
Well, thank you very much, Isabella. And
thank you for coming. It's your first time in our studio.
No, third time. That's exactly. No, thank you for having me here. Thank you. Thanks to NBS, and also to thank the leadership of this country for really doing an excellent job in managing multiple disasters at the same time. And thanks to Honorable Achur for the expose on this. As UNDP and you know, a UN family, this is a very, very important one. And again, I don't want to dwell so much about the context, because I know Honorable Achur talked about that. But let me try to situate why we are doing what we are doing. A couple of things. We haven't seen this before. It's unprecedented. We have COVID-19. Our beautiful country is also experiencing floods, locusts, droughts, like you said. We have seen the Victoria and now best their banks. And we have seen the impact. In fact, the Office of the Prime Minister tells us that about 340,000 people in January alone were affected by disasters. So with that context and with what we know now, Why do we have to do things differently? And the first one is around the development agenda of the country, the sustainable development goals. If we have disaster risk today, it doesn't only impact, when you have floods, it's not only about floods. It's about impacting on hospitals, education, infrastructure, and all that. And with the impact of COVID, we are already seeing some of the sustainable development goals regress. They're going down already. Okay, so, and poverty levels are increasing. We are already seeing that perhaps 3.2 million people will go into poverty by the end of 2020, 2021, if we don't do anything about it. So from a sustainable development point of view, we need to tackle the issue of disaster risk reduction as part of our policies, as part of our programs, as part of our financing moving forward. The second point, which I wanted to highlight, is UNDP's own mandate, and by extension, the mandate of other agencies as well. The development setting that we operate in is threefold: to help countries to eradicate poverty, to support countries to address structural transformation, and the third thing is to help countries to be resilient to crisis and shocks. And locusts, COVID-19, pests, landslides are all part of the resilience agenda that we have to promote in the country. The third thing that I want to talk about, and I think Honorable Acholi dwelt on it, is using nature-based solutions to address what we are seeing. What am I talking about? We need to be looking at how can we reduce deforestation, for example. The country has lost, since 1990, 24% of its forest cover has reduced to 9% already, which means that if the forests go and the rains come, you have the landslides. So it's quite important for us to see the interconnections of using nature-based solutions, ecosystem restoration, to be able to address the issues of disaster risk reduction. The fourth thing that I wanted to touch base very quickly is the building back agenda that I think Honorable Acholi alluded to. What does it actually mean? And we are using this phrase time and again. We've been impacted by COVID. We've been impacted by locusts. We have floods. We have to recover. We have to build again. How do we do it differently? What are the systems we put in place? What are the processes? What are the governance instruments, be it at the national level, the local level, the traditional systems, the communities? How do we do it differently? And I think that to expect that we do the same things and have different results, it's not going to work anymore. So really, for us as a country, the beautiful pearl of Africa, ours is to rethink and to reimagine how do we do disaster risk differently from what we have been doing, so that we are not reactive. When something comes, we run. But how do we prevent, for example?
So we are proactive.
We are proactive. What are the systems? How do we build capacity of institutions? Not only the OPMs and the NECOCs, but how do we work with different sectors? Because the agriculture sector plays a role, the water sector will play a role, energy will play a role. Because, for example, if people don't have, alternatives to charcoal, they go to cut the trees. So it means that energy sector also has a role. So in many sense, the Building Back Better agenda, the SDGs, and finally, I just wanted to dwell on one last point, which is what we call in the UN, of course, the government, leaving no one behind. That means that we have to be very focused on the vulnerable groups. When disaster hits, the women are impacted, the youth are impacted, the elderly are impacted, the persons with disabilities are impacted, and therefore it is important that we are conscious about that vulnerable group and vulnerable sectors, so that in our agenda of reducing disaster risk, we are able to respond to the most vulnerable. So this is why we are doing what we are doing, bringing the conversation, giving focus to it, highlighting experience, and seeing how together as a country we can drive this conversation forward.
All right. I would like for you to help us understand how you are working with government. But before we get into that, I want to get it from government's perspective. The challenges they encounter while responding to crises and shocks. Honorable Acholi, if you're present, kindly let us know, do you encounter any challenges while dealing with this particular crisis?
Certainly huge challenges. But I want to first thank my sister from the UNDP. But I want to start from that level. The UNDP has been our very critical partner in preparedness. For example, when you hear about the NECOC, the National Emergency Operation and Coordination Center, that has been established in the Office of the Prime Minister, That center, a very, very good center, which just needs a bit of fine tuning to make sure that we are effective all the way down up to the districts, was set up jointly thanks to the UNDP support with the government of Uganda and Office of the Prime Minister. So I want to thank my sister and the teams. The second one is the UNDP has been there to coordinate some of our programs, particularly to give training to some of the technical people using some of the facilities. For example, the south to south support that they have been able to sometimes tap into to help do the training, particularly in a number of areas that are to do with the prediction and surveillance and what we call hazard mapping. That is understanding the threats that are prevalent, that are latent in the country. But coming to what you're saying, do we face challenges? Huge challenges. For example, now the truth is that COVID-19 has impacted very negatively on the economy of the country. I want to say that we are lucky as Uganda that we are an agro-based, ours is an agro-based economy, that while the cities, while the towns are suffering situations of near paralysis, save for the factories that are functioning, the agricultural people down in the villages are busy producing food. There is a lot of cultivation going on in the country. So that gives me a bit of confidence that we will have a dented economy, but it will not collapse. It will not collapse because the people in the villages are producing. But what is happening is we needed resources. We need the resources to manage, first of all, the relief phase of our interventions. There are thousands of people displaced. In Kasese alone, about 13 internally displaced people's camps. And you can imagine being uprooted from your homes, and we give you a sanctuary in a school or a health facility, and it compromises so many things, including social distancing and so on and so forth, which are the SOPs of Ministry of Health. So that is a challenge in itself, that people who are supposed to be having some discipline in their homes, however poor their homes were, are now uprooted from their normal dwellings and are now living in internally displaced people's camps. And we're working around the clock to make sure that we disperse these people immediately to places where they can be safe. So that is a challenge. Then the challenge of resources itself is a big challenge. And I will again call to our partners to make sure that we come on top of this situation also. The third one, which is a huge challenge, is certainly awareness. Awareness, both even from the national level. We think many people are still, even those whom we think should be knowing, like I have told you, some of my colleague members of parliament are built in what is now a lake. And so if people, the light of that level, legislators, people who are supposed to make laws in the country, are the very ones who are found wanting, then there is a problem. So sensitization from the national level going down, and it cascades down to the local level, is extremely something that we have found wanting. And then majorly, the other problem is taking our actions to be coordinated at a sector level, and from the sectors down to the local people, down to the village where real emergencies happen. And so that is, to me, those are the challenges that we must confront head on. But again, I can assure the country that we will continue to suffer, but we will be on top of it. We are determined to make sure that we survive.
Right. Would you like to supplement on what he said?
So in terms of what we are doing?
Yes.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Isabella. A couple of points from our side as UNDP, and certainly also by extension what we are doing as a UN family. The first thing that is important in disaster risk reduction is understanding the risk. Okay, so and because understanding the risk is important for you to profile what needs to be done. What we have been doing is very much strongly supporting government to understand where the risks are. Okay, the existing risk, the new risk, the potential risk. In doing that, we have been helping the Office of the Prime Minister and the National Emergency Coordination Office to really look at a national atlas on risk. Okay, where are the risk districts? And so that has been very, very informative in terms of supporting early warning systems in the country. So that's one of the things we've been doing. We've also been looking at vulnerability assessment assessments, which districts are vulnerable, which actors are vulnerable, and that's been quite instrumental again in informing what the government intervention needs to be at that level. I should also say that we have provided quite extensively automated weather stations and hydrological stations all over the country. In fact, we've installed 42 of them, 42 more coming, 82 of them countrywide, and we have also rehabilitated the existing ones. Now, that is very important because you can then get the information on whether it's going to be raining, is it going to flood, how is it going to come through. So those kind of products, for me, from an information, from a data analysis point of view, is one of the areas that the UN family it's really supporting. One of the things we've done recently, which is very important to highlight, is that we have looked at an integrated spatial analysis of where do we have COVID, where do we have floods, where do we have locusts? And we have been able to bring them all together to give a sense to the government where decisions have to be taken. So, for example, you can see that Karamoja is very vulnerable in that sense because it has locust, it has COVID, and then it also has issues around flood. So these are the kind of things that we are helping the government with in terms of climate products, climate services, early warning systems to help them be able to make decisions around that. One of the supports we are providing to NECO is also that they're able to produce newsletters monthly. Farmers can get access to, district councils can get access to. So that's the first thing on what we are doing, understanding the risk. The second thing we are looking at is strengthening disaster risk governance. Now, when we talk governance, we are not talking government. Governance is, everything that helps to improve efficiency and effectiveness in systems and processes. So you're looking at national level, you're looking at local government, district level, traditional authorities. And in the governance space, we have been really, as the Honorable Minister, and thank you for acknowledging the work of UNDP there, for the past 10 years supporting NECOC. Now, we are going beyond NECOC because NECOC is at the national level, now translating into activating district emergency coordination operations centers, what we call DECOCs, so that at the district level, they can be able to be quick enough to respond to some of the disasters that we're talking about. So what are we practically doing? Helping them with training, capacity building, equipment, drones, to be able to see the floods are coming, how you don't have to go there physically. Sometimes you can fly a drone to be able to see that. So these are some of the things that we are doing practically. On the governance side, I also wanted to say perhaps finally on e-governance. E-governance. Now, during this time of crisis, we've been able to provide video conferencing facilities, Zoom facilities to about 500 government institutions. Now, that has been able to help the government to respond to some of the crises very quickly. And I believe that if those facilities were not available, we'll not be able to do that. The third thing is investment, which is very, very important when you come to issues around disaster risk reduction, climate change issues, nature-based solutions. What are we doing in the area of investment? We are investing very, very strongly in issues around ecosystem restoration, wetland restoration. In fact, we have a 42 million project that is currently ongoing where we are restoring wetlands in about 24 districts. So that's part of the investment that we're talking about. We are also investing in energy solutions in health sectors, because for frontline workers, if there's no electricity, how are they going to function? So in many ways, we are providing solar system to selected health centers to be able to operate. But what we're also doing in terms of investment is looking at the financing dimensions to it, because many a time when there is crisis, you may divert, or you may see government or partners divert resources from where it should have been to other things. Now, what are some of the financing instruments, products, services that we can, and we're beginning to look into areas like insurance risk financing, weather-based insurance, and these are very innovative financing tools and systems that can help country actors, partners be able to look at disaster risk financing in a very sustainable way over time. So clearly these are some of the investments that we are looking into, and perhaps finally in the area of investment, it's not only UNDP, other agencies, sister agencies are investing. WFP, FAO, IOM, they're all investing in many ways in food security system, agriculture value chains. For us, for example, and I think we're here a couple of weeks ago with Jumia, launching an e-commerce platform that is helping farmers, that is helping vendors connect to online consumers. And that in this way is helping to address some of the issues around, disaster risk reduction. Then finally, what we are doing, which is very important as a UN family, is supporting the Building Back agenda. And I just wanted to dwell on that on 3 quick points.
Please.
The first one is we are now working on a social economic analysis. That is going to be very crucial in terms of not the assessment of the impact of COVID and other disasters, but importantly, the recommendations. What are the policy instruments? What are the economic stimuli that we need to put in place to support government moving forward? So as a system, that part of the work is supposed to help the country look into the future on what can be done differently when it comes to ecosystem restoration and disaster risk reduction. That's the one thing we are doing. The second thing is a real look at the National Development Plan 3. What we have done, we want to thank government for that, is that disaster risk reduction has been mainstreamed or integrated into all the programs in the NDP3. But it's not enough to just stay at the NDP3 level. How do we translate the NDP3 into practical implementation of the programs that we're talking about? And that will be very, very key in terms of the actions that need to be taken. And we're already having conversations with NPA to be able to see how best we can look in some of these things. The third thing that I wanted to touch on very quickly is on the UN appeal. A couple of weeks ago, we had a big UN appeal, which is looking at different dimensions of how we can support society. There's a huge component on disaster risk reduction, displacement, and that part of the work that we are doing as a UN family is also to be able to support the government to recover and to respond strategically to the issues around disaster risk reduction. So these, I would say, some of the key things that we are doing as a family.
All right. Before I go to the Honorable Minister, quickly, are there any countries in similar context with good practices that Uganda can pick up on?
Well, I think different countries are in different contexts and different countries are working to suit their conditions. But they're quite, just like Uganda has good practices, other countries do have good practices as well. A couple of things that I want to say. Most countries are looking at disaster risk reduction, setting in the whole ecosystem agenda business from three points of view. A, how do you protect lives? How do you mitigate? And how do you ensure resilience into the future? In that regard, I would say that countries are looking at how you can protect jobs, for example, because when disaster hits, you lose jobs. Yes. In our case, like Uganda, we do see that already, that the informal sector, we have a lot of people who have lost jobs. And therefore, protection of jobs is becoming a very important space. We know that countries like Ghana, for example, are working very, very strongly in that space, where they're trying to see how best to look at the medium, small-scale industries and trying to protect some of those the jobs in those spaces. We also see a lot of work in the region. About 45 countries in the region are looking at social safety nets. Like I said, when disaster hits, it impacts on the most vulnerable, the women, the persons with disabilities, the elderly, the youth. And therefore, what are the social safety nets? And about 45 countries in the region are already quite strong in that space, looking at social safety nets. Food security is very, very important. We know, for example, countries like Cote d'Ivoire, countries like Chad, for example, where they are creating cereal banks, for example, because if disaster hits, people have to eat. And therefore, if you don't have national reserves, for example, what do you do about it? You know, Rwanda, they all have quite some interesting experiences that we can draw from. We also seeing quite a lot of countries, about 20 of them, looking at the fiscal space. How do you use subsidies, taxes, tax rebates, and things like that to support issues around disaster risk reduction? I earlier on talked about innovative financing. That's a very important space as well, where countries are looking into. And finally, on digital innovation, I think that's a very important space on e-governance processes, e-commerce processes. A number of countries are coming on board. For the case of Jumia that I talked about, we already have Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and others coming on board in terms of similar arrangements. So overall, I would say that quite a lot of work happening in the region. I would say that we need to continue that space, especially development partners and government to work together to ensure that we are looking at the right policies, the right programs, the right capacity building and coordination to ensure that we can be able to support the government in an impactful way.
All right, thank you so much, Elsie. Honorable, you will be making the final remarks on this particular show. Our time is fast spent. Budget day is upon us. Are there any particular, what should we expect in terms of tackling environmental degradation and building back better from disasters?
First of all, I want to thank my sister again for running through some of the critical areas that we have partnered with as a government and the UNDP. I want to emphasize one thing. We as a government are not just sitting and watching and lamenting. We have graduated from issues of lamentation to really being on top of the situation and confronting these challenges head on. One of the things that we are doing even now as we talk, while we are managing COVID and all these emergencies, we have learned one thing, and this is what my sister said, alluded to, the question of us, for example, the Minister of Disaster Preparedness, inviting people, Ugandans, to supply food for supporting the needy, those who were vulnerable in the city, and then we realized that we had the crisis of beans. We didn't have adequate beans. And now we are learning, we are saying this is a big eye-opener. I want to let the country know, as we talk now, there is critical discussion that is led by the Minister of Agriculture, but it has drawn all of us, including intellectuals from the Minister of Defense and the National Development Plan 3 managers, to come up with what we call a national food security policy for Uganda. A national food security policy for Uganda. And I posed just 3 questions. I said, I want to know at any given time how much food is in the country. I want to know where that food is located. I want to know the quality of that food. I want to know that Ugandans have access to that food from all corners of the country. That is what a disaster minister wants to know. Where is food? How much is there? What is the quality? And how can we access it? For example, if it is in Hoima, or how can the people of Karamoja access it? If it is in Kisoro, how can the people of Koboko access it? And we are going to work with you in UNDP to make sure that this policy is properly developed and actualized. We are also looking, so I am sure that the national budget is going to look at so many of those areas, support these very, very creative areas which will help us in preparedness, support in mitigation, support in response, so that our communities will continue to stand on their feet even in the face of these challenges. Because the truth is, disasters are going to continue being with us. They will be ferocious, and all we need to do is to prepare our people to all the time remain on their feet. And they may slide, but they must be able to get back, and that's what my sister is describing as resilience. And how can we prepare our communities to become resilient? That is the work in progress. And finally, I want to assure the country that it is true. I want to acknowledge, as a Minister for Disaster Management, that we have not been very effective at the district level, at the sub-county level, and down in the village where disasters are happening. We must strengthen the district disaster committees, strengthen the sub-county disaster management, and take it down to the villages, so that even before Kampala arrives, the village must be able to handle its emergency as it unfolds. The district must be able to. That is work in progress, and that is something that we must do as a matter of urgency. So these are all things that we are working around the clock to make sure they happen. And I want to assure the country that we'll continue to do whatever it takes, working with the partners, to make sure that us as a government, we commit ourselves to serving the country, because that is why we got their mandate.
Thank you so much, Honorable, for sparing time to speak to us and enlighten us on the topic. Very many people are left in the dark because they rarely get to listen to government stance on these particular issues, but we're grateful that you spared time to speak to us. This particular session has come to a close, but before I let you go, Elsie, I'll allow you 30 seconds to give us your final 2 cents on this matter.
Well, I mean, look, one of the most compelling challenges we have is disaster risk reduction and climate change and ecosystem restoration. Our beautiful country can do a lot to salvage the situation. I think that we need to look at integrated approaches. Like I said, how do we handle multiple disasters at the same time? Innovative approaches. How do we provide incentives to communities, to local governments, to traditional leaders to be at the forefront of this, and most importantly, be smart about the investment that we make. That's going to determine how robust our systems are to be able to deal with multiple disasters in the future. So for us as a UN family, and indeed UNDP, it's a pleasure to support the agenda of government. We continue to do that, and hopefully when we come back again to the studio to talk about it, we'll be talking about some of the major changes changes, the structural changes, and the big initiative that the government is leading to really address this challenge. But it's been an exciting day for me to really bring some advocacy to the subject matter. So thank you very much.
Thank you too. It was really nice having you. Please do come again. The conversation we're having this morning was pertaining to managing multiple disasters here in Uganda during COVID-19, the lessons and experiences learned for the future. As you've listened from both a UNDP country rep and then also a resident representative, I beg your pardon, and then also the minister, I hope you have taken something from this conversation. If you have not, please be sure to catch this particular clip on YouTube. The page is at Next Media Uganda. Good morning. God bless. My name is Isabella Tugume.